The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016, EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 5, Love and Swordplay. Looking at the young farmer's anxious expression, Cursoon smiled to himself. This is what he loved about being a bard, captivating his listeners within his tale. Cursoon continued his story.
I jumped aside, evading her razor-sharp blade by only inches, and without thinking, I snatched my grandfather's sword from its scabbard and held it up in a vain attempt to defend myself. At the same time, the sun's light flashed upon its blade, and this dazzled Frey for the briefest of moments so that she paused to consider my handsomely made weapon. However, after only a second of admiration, the shield maiden lunged at me, while twisting around her sword so that she forced fortuity from my hand. It flipped through the air and landed point first among the tall golden wheat. The steel blade gave off a slight ring as it stabbed into the earth far out of my reach.
Oh no!
The mouth of Guileless fell open with shock, and he wrung his callous hands together.
I fought to keep my fright from being expressed upon my face. Stepping backward a pace, I frantically drew out my other sword.
Cursoon took a plain-looking sword out of its scabbard and showed it to the young farmer. This weapon was very different from his grandfather's sword, and to Cursoon's knowledge, it had no name. Its double-edged blade was not straight like that of Fortuity, nor curved like Frey's. Instead, it was shaped something like a leaf, being narrow near the hilt, slightly broadening in the middle, and then finally coming to a sharp point. As for the hilt, it consisted of a plain crossguard and a knob-shaped pommel, both molded of bronze. The grip was carved from acacia wood, and it was stained a blood-red color. The wood was sculpted so that it had 7 grooves around it. In this way it fit the wielder's fingers perfectly, and thus the hilt would not easily slip from the hand. Cursoon went on with his story.
This weapon did not turn away Frey's attention as did the first. It isn't impressive in the least. After all, it's a very plain-looking sword. Thus, ignoring this new weapon, Frey lunged forward again, moving her shapely body with grace. The view briefly distracted me from my peril, but I soon remembered her cruel blade when it whistled past my ear. With panic in my heart, I foolishly closed my eyes and blindly lifted my plain sword to protect myself.
Cursoon laughed with astonishment as he relived his memories.
I moved my sword this way and that, only hoping to parry her strikes. I heard and felt several clashes against my blade, and the last strike ended with the ringing break of metal. When I opened my eyes, I found Frey holding Brelina with wide grey eyes. Her long, curved blade was now only half its original length, for it had snapped against my nameless sword. To tell you the truth, I was just as shocked as her.
But how?
Guileless asked with amazed confusion.
I guess it was luck,
Cursoon suggested with a shrug.
After all, my family has always been very lucky. At any rate, the incident didn't distract Frey for long. Quickly recovering from her astonishment, the shield maiden slowly strolled toward me with her broken blade still in her hand. She moved like a cat on the hunt, and I felt trapped like a mouse. Yet, I stood my ground holding my weapon with a slight shudder that I was barely able to hide. Nervously, I gripped its hilt with white knuckles while making ready for her next attack. To my surprise, she suddenly lunged at me while parrying my blade aside with what was left of her own and knocking me to the ground. We came to rest in the tall wheat, me on my back and her on top of me. As she held herself over me, she fixed her grey eyes upon my own, as if she was studying and weighing me in her mind. That's when I first noticed a detail about barbarian eyes that I had not earlier known.
What did you learn?
Guileless asked while clinching the log he sat upon and leaning forward with anticipation.
Their eyes aren't totally grey,
Cursoon explained.
Wait, what?
The farmer responded skeptically.
There's a ring of colour around the grey,
the bard declared while making a circle in the air with his finger around his own eye.
It's like a thin halo of colour, and hers are hazel.
The farmer sat back while letting out a gasp of surprise.
Surely I've never been close enough to tell that, nor have I wanted to be.
He caught himself.
Begging your pardon, sir.
As before, Cure soon dismissed his words with a wave and returned to his storytelling.
So there she was looking down at me, and after the briefest pause, she narrowed her eyes while the same mischievous smile returned to her beautiful face. She then slowly leaned closer, until finally our lips met in a passionate kiss.
The farmer let a wide, silly grin show upon his freckled face, but for a change, he did not interrupt.
My cold fear melted away within the heat of her embrace. I gazed at her lovely face as we continued to kiss. Her soft lips were warm, and her breath ever so sweet. To me, it seemed as though our swordplay continued. Only now, our tongues were our blades, and it felt like each thrust went deeper than the previous. I'm still not sure who won our contest, but I'm certain that she took my heart captive. Not long after, we were married, and I moved her into a fine cottage on the borders of my father's lands. In time, Frey bore to me 4 sons, and all seemed well. However, a proud swordwife from the north is not easily satisfied with the quiet life of a farmer, even if he is also a bard.
Cure soon gently slid the plain sword back into its scabbard, and then returned to sit upon his log. With a sigh, he finished his tale.
She soon grew restless, and when our youngest son fell ill and passed into the land of shadows, her restlessness became far too burdensome for her wild heart. At length, she took our 3 remaining sons and went away. That was some 6 months ago.
Guileless did not seem surprised.
I mean, no disrespect, sir, but you can't expect much more from a barbarian.
The freckle-faced farmer stated in a sorrowful but pragmatic tone.
I think lumping a whole race into a single category of conduct is less than wise.
Cure soon retorted gently with an apologetic grin.
Rightly so.
Guileless replied with a nod.
And that's why I'd never do that, to be sure.
He added firmly. For a moment, the bard eyed the younger man with a confused look, but when he saw that the farmer was oblivious to his own contradiction, Cure soon shook his head and went on.
I have no idea where they've gone,
he said with a sad shrug.
but my heart aches to bring them home again, and to make the matter worse, my imagination seems bent upon envisioning the most horrible fates that could possibly befall them. Though I fight against these thoughts, I feel utterly strained with this constant worry. As I've said before, I've searched all the country of liberty, and I've wandered into many dark and foul places. I even returned to the forest of Blackthorn, though I once vowed I would never enter that wicked wood again. At any rate, this is the one place I haven't looked.
Cure soon took a deep breath, as if he had unburdened his heart, if only for a moment, and then he ran his hand through his long hair. Finding a loose strand, he unconsciously twisted the hair around his fingers.